This is the Grapple Right, episode 62, Joe Malenko. Welcome to the Grapple Right show. My guest this week, I consider one of the hidden branches in the tree of grappling. I think he's an MMA pioneer who kind of maybe got hidden away behind the world of pro wrestling a little bit. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Joe Malenko. Thank you for joining us.
No, you're welcome. Good to be here.
Thank you. Now, as a first-time guest on this show, the first question it always starts with, which is probably an easy one for you, where did it all begin for you?
1956, when I came out of my mom and appeared into the hospital and said, "Ta-da! Here I am." I was born, first and foremost, I was born into the wrestling business, into the professional wrestling business. And then as far as wrestling, I started amateur when I was 7 years old. So I was a schoolboy, freestyler, and then slowly but surely made my way into the world of submission wrestling. But first and foremost, we were always wrestlers. The one thing that makes me laugh all the time is that the nomenclature and people trying to categorize stuff. And we just, yeah. If you ask Carl what he did when he was, when he was around, it's hard to ask him now. But when he was around, if you asked him what he did, he would tell you he was a wrestler first and foremost. And then the submission stuff just, factored into the equation. He wasn't a catch as catch can guy. He wasn't this, that, and that. We've got so many names for things nowadays, even the moves and the holds. I mean, we didn't even have, we probably didn't have names for 90% of our holds. He would just say, do that one, do the other one, do that, okay, now up top. Yeah. Different world. But I got started. I let me digress. So I got started early.
No, definitely. What was it like then growing up? I mean, you're growing up the son of the great Malenko, so you've got, you're doing your amateur stuff and all that as well. What was it like having that sort of a character around? And I imagine various people turning up at dinner at your house and things like that as a youngster growing up.
I mean, it was all I knew. It's like anybody else, your dad is your dad, your mom's your mom. I mean, they can have things attached to them that are different or unusual. Being a professional wrestler was kind of unusual to have a dad who wrestled professionally because people would look at you like, "What does your dad do?" And you'd have to tell them, "Well, he wrestles professionally." And then, of course, they'd say, "Oh, you mean that fake stuff?" And I'm, "No, not fake." But when it really became evident was when people would visit the house when I was a young boy because we just had it was like a circus. I tell a lot of the same stories over and over again because that's what you do as you get older. And we would have guys come over who were 6'10", and we would have other guys come over who were 4'2". And it looked like a circus coming in and out of our house. And that was sort of the thing that put the exclamation point on the fact that we were in the wrestling business because it was a very circus-like geeks and freaks kind of atmosphere.
What sort of point for you then? Because as you say, as a child, you're doing the amateur, you're training, etc. When did that moment come to you where you think, yeah, this is something that I actually want to take up seriously myself? I'm not just doing it as a kid, as a hobby or whatever. This is something, yeah, I get this. I want to do this.
When Gotch first came to Tampa, he had left Hawaii and he was coming to town. He was going to be actually was going to be living right next door to us. So there was an apartment complex where a lot of the professional wrestlers lived, and we lived in an apartment upstairs on the second floor. And so there was an apartment right adjacent to us, and that was where Carl was going to move into. And before he came to town, my dad came up to me and he said, "Hey, Gotch is coming here, and I want to know if you wanted him to train you, because if you do, I'll talk to him a little bit." I'm not, of course, I'd love that because at that stage of the game, I had already known who Carl was and his accomplishments and also what he trained guys to do. What people don't know about Carl is not only was he the submission guy and considered the god of wrestling in Japan, and probably and not even arguably one of the founders of mixed martial arts, even though he's gotten lost in the phrase somewhat. Um, you know, he trained, he trained legitimately in wrestling. He went to the Olympics in 48, and then he trained a couple other guys, Mewis, Jeff and Joseph Mewis, one who took silver in the Olympics and the other who took gold in the Worlds. So Carl was an accomplished wrestler himself, an accomplished trainer, and this was way before he really started into the your world of submission wrestling and catch. Um, so I knew of his pedigree and what he had done as a coach, and I was excited to have him train me. And that's when I really dove in head first, feet first, body first, and took a beating for a year before he ever taught me the first move.
No, 'cause he was like a journeyman of a wrestler. And I think that I mean a lot of people sort of look at Bruce Lee at putting things together, and I think he was very much the same. He went around, yeah, we know, his time at the Snake Pit and Wigan. He's talked about that. You can look that up, and what he learned there. But he always seemed to take things, put it together. It wasn't always just. Yeah, he took the stuff from Wigan, but he mixed that with what already had, and maybe something else he'd learned from Japan. I mean, that's what I liked about his sort of style and his training as well, and like the training things are legendary. I mean, the deck of cards thing is a legendary in itself now and that. But what was it like for you then? You've now you're going to start training with Karl Gotch. What was involved? What was that? Because there are all sorts of tales of sit-ups and squats and all sorts of conditioning things. And that, what was it like for you going into that as someone who was already, you're already doing your amateur stuff, you're already doing bits of wrestling, to suddenly go with what was the difference when you started with Carl? What did you have to do? What was the
Well, so it was
conditioning?
first off, it was a world of difference because conditioning was key. So in order to be with Gotch, you had to make the commitment that you were going to become conditioned to the point of almost craziness. So the one thing that he did with me was two things really. Actually, one was toughening up. So and this lasted for about a year before he really started diving into technique and moves. For about a year, it was toughening up, which meant beating the crap out of me, literally having me stand there and just taking it. And then, for like cross faces and front face locks and just having to fight out of things and not being the guy that I couldn't tap out. I wasn't allowed to tap out. So I had to fight through things and I had to show him that I was tough because it all stemmed from the very first thing Carl said to me. And the very first thing he said to me was, I'll give you everything. I'll give you strength, I'll give you conditioning, agility, endurance, I'll give you all those things. You only have to give me one thing, and that's heart. If you give me heart, if you can come to this and you just will not give up, I'll give you everything else you need. And that was his deal. So I agreed to that. And again, I tell the story all the time that he when he saw that I was going to continue on out, and this didn't last long because he knew that I wasn't going to stop. He came to me and he said, I want to buy you your first pair of boots." And they were, legitimate. They call them shooter boots, and they were the short professional wrestling boots, a little bit shorter on you, but they were sturdy. They're really good if somebody's, doing ankle locks and stuff like that. They give you a little bit of more stability. And so he agreed to buy my first pair, but then and it was 20 it was a $20 pair of boots back in the day. It was, 1970, I guess, 70, 71. And he bought them from K&H and he gave them to me and he says, "Okay, so here's the deal with these. I'm buying these for you. If you quit, I will end up with nothing but the eyelets because I will beat the crap out of you with these boots, and I'll have nothing left but the eyelets in my hands." And I said, "Okay, I'll stay with it. I'm not gonna let you beat me with my own boots." And that's kind of how everything started. I'm gonna teach you how to be conditioned. I'm gonna teach you how to have enough gas in the tank to go however long you need to go and wear people out. And it's gonna take about a year, and I'm gonna make sure that you're tough enough so no matter what anybody does, you're probably not gonna submit. And again, I'll do that for a year, and then we'll get in. I'll see how you do, and then we'll get into the real training, which always at all times always uh, contain conditioning. You never stop conditioning. To this day I don't. I mean my range of motion sucks, but I still do squats, I still do push-ups, I still do all those things.
Sort of a daily. amount that you had to do or something like that? So people listening to this sort of think, there's a lot of emphasis on the older workouts now. A lot of the old, like the Farmer Burns stuff, the Gotch stuff is sort of coming back into style again because, it was never broken to begin with, probably. I mean, that
Yeah.
was pretty much what got me through lockdown, in all honesty. But with yourself, what was your normal, you got to the gym at whatever time in the morning, what was your normal sort of routine on average that you would sort of do just to give people an idea of like what was
So,
involved?
so, so for me, because I had started with Carl at the time, Carl demanded that first thing in the morning before I went to school, and and when I started, I was what, 13. Um, First thing in the morning before I went to school, we trained. So he would come out, he would walk out of his place, he would come downstairs, and he'd yell up to you, Joe, his big booming voice, and I'd come out and we'd start training. It'd be 4:30, 5 o'clock, whenever it was. We get an hour and change in, which included squats and push-ups and working the clubs and pushing against each other and you know maybe doing a few you know maybe doing a few things repetitively like single legs or double leg dives and stuff like that. And then that was the first piece in the morning, and then later on in the afternoon, that was when we had a couple 3 hours to be able to train, and that was every day. I mean, for 7 years, I can't remember too many days that I missed. I definitely never I never took a week off. I never took weeks off. Maybe I left out for a day or two, right? Because I had something to do at school, but just short of that, that's what we trained. And the rule of thumb was you got to be able to do 500 squats. It was really the squats that were the most important because, if you have your legs, you sort of got everything. I mean, yeah, you got to work on your upper body, but legs are where you push out of, right? So if you have your legs about you, and they've actually got studies now that show as you get older, if you keep your legs up, you stand a better chance of living longer. You can let the rest of your body go a little bit, but don't let your legs go. So it was all about, you had to do 500 squats. There really wasn't a certain number of push-ups, but by the time everything was said and done, and we did a lot of sweeping push-ups, the Indian style sweepers, they call them Dons. And, at the time, the most I ever did, I did 535 straight in over an hour. Um, but that's where we needed to go to. And squats 3,000 hour and 47 minutes. But and that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. I mean, I stood there and just up down for an hour and 47 minutes, 3,000 squats. Carl did 9,000 4.5 hours. And you read. I mean, I don't know, it was the great Gama or whoever it was, but I mean, I think
Yeah,
even Carl's number was bested by some of the Pakistani guys, or some of the guys where all this stuff originated.
yeah. So from there, then you're training with Carl, and then your first, or what I could see from that, your first sort of major outing as a professional wrestler is in Mexico with the UWA. And looking at some of the names around, and you had like Fishman Paraguayo, Hurricane Ramirez, the Villanos. There was only three of them at that point. Darrell Dixon, who's another
Mathematical.
forgotten name. Yeah, so I mean, there's loads of massive names there, and you're going down there as Karl Gotch Jr. Now, is
Yeah.
that putting a target on your back to start with before you've even got there, or
I
is that?
define, I mean, not necessarily the target on my back as much as it defined some expectations that weren't met, frankly, because I wasn't a seasoned pro at that point. I was just coming into the business. I worked a few times here and there. I refereed a lot. And by the time I made it down to Mexico, I really hadn't done a lot of matches, although I could feel my way around in the ring pretty well. But then enter into the picture the fact that you're in Mexico now is lucha libre style. So, you've got a lot of different ways of doing things in the ring that are so different than we were doing here in the States. It was a bit of a reach for me, and
Mhm.
yeah, I was okay, but I wasn't anything special. And even one of the magazines said, yeah, he didn't turn out to be, this great guy that we expect him to be, because I had Karl Gott's name. They had expectations, and I was a young kid. But I had a great time there, and I learned, and I spent some good time running around the country with some great folks. So it was a good time in my life. But the most prideful thing was the fact that Carl came up to me before I went down there, and he said to me, "Do you want to use my name? Do you want to take my name?" I didn't ask him, and so just him doing that was a major sign of
Yeah.
yeah, you've done good, my young man friend. I'm gonna let you take my name.
No, it is. Yeah. I don't know. It just dawned on me just walking in with that name. I just sort of thought, oh man. But no, but you carried it well. From there, the next major bit I've got is you sort of turn up in Japan because you got the well, it's UWF first,
Yeah, UWF.
and with Satoru Sayama, who or the Tiger Mask, I guess is more well known, or Super Tiger as he was at that point. How did that come about then? Because is this your first sort of time? Because you end up almost forming a dojo whilst you're over there as well, don't you? Because you've got different people training with you and stuff like that. How did
Yeah.
how did all that come about?
Again, that's Carl.
Hmm.
Carl's influence in Japan was extremely strong, and Fujiwara and Sayama and Maeda and all these guys were beholding to Carl. And at the time, what they wanted to do was to have an offshoot promotion that was more legit and based in grappling and based in wrestling, based in submission style, and then enter into the picture. You had Super Tiger, who was a Muay Thai guy, so he brought the Muay Thai piece to the equation, which that was really the start of MMA in some sense. Although there were mixed matches going back a century, but that was really the start of things really kind of coming together in multiple martial art forms coming together, multiple fight forms coming together. And Carl made it all happen because everybody in Japan just seemed to gravitate towards him and his style, and they loved it. And that's how he got the name Kamisama, because he was just so revered off of what he brought to Japan, which again was the submission style of wrestling, the original catch that he learned when he was in Wigan and that he improvised on. And the one thing I'll bring up about Carl is that people don't people have no idea of how much this man sat in his chair on a porch and had a cigar and had a nice drink in his hand. He always had a drink in his hand. He wasn't alcoholic. He wasn't alcoholic, but he loved to drink. And we would just sit and talk. And he always was sitting there thinking about how to do something different on a mat. How could he change up something? How could he make it more effective? How could he create more efficiency by going from one thing to the next? How could he play off of somebody's imbalance and take advantage of them? And that's where his mind was all the time. So even though he learned all these things from other places, which is typical, we don't create much. We recreate a lot of things. That's what he did. He took all these things that he learned from Pakistan and India and from Wigan and all other different parts of the world. He brought it together, and he really did create the GOT style of training and the GOT style of submission wrestling. But he never Carl would say, if you stop learning, you die, right? If you stop learning, you don't grow. If you stop learning, you die. And he always was learning. He was learning. It was a natural in his own head kind of thing, day in, day out. You would see him, he'd have a cigar and he'd be sitting there like this, and the smoke be fading off into the distance, and his head would be on a mat. Um, it was his everything.
How was that received, and do you think in Japan at the time? Because obviously Tiger Mask was like this massive superhero name, kind of like a Hogan, that sort of size at the time. So there's cartoons and films and whatever. You've got Gotch and you've got this UWF, and you've always got the All Japan, New Japan sort of war that's going on. And then there's these new guys coming in the middle, and this is a bit more. There's more oomph to this, and like you say, it's almost like the maybe the mainstream birth of a sort of mixed martial arts thing in Japan at least, and it's getting all this attention. You've got wrestlers from around the world. You've got you guys. You've got obviously like Takada's starting to make an name. Kido's there. Even Pete Roberts from the UK is in there for a while and training and stuff as well.
Yeah,
And
Pete Roberts. Pete
how?
Roberts was over
Yeah,
with me.
yeah. I mean, he's a hero of mine from the British scene, so it's quite nice to see him when he popped up over there. I mean, what was the kind of you had this sort of melting pot of, like you said, these different styles, these different techniques. How was it received? How did it become what you they wanted it to be, or did it become sort of its own? Because it
Um,
doesn't last as long as I think people hoped it would.
no, and I think a lot of that has to do with the sort of the intrinsic nature of the Japanese wrestling scene, which is it's very it's constantly shifting and changing and new promotions coming in and promotions leaving and guys starting their own deal. I mean, even guys in Japan that you consider to be, the stalwarts of their promotion, all of a sudden they turn around, they're gone, and they're starting their own thing. It always struck me as weird because I consider the Japanese to be extremely loyal people, but in light of professional wrestling, a lot of guys would just take off from the promotion they were at and head out and do their own thing. So, Japan has always been one of these places where nationally there's been, a dozen, 20, 30 different promotions. The UWF was just a part of that. And, we fought for a little space and all that. But at some point in time, everybody kind of disbanded and went their own ways. People, had their ideas to do other things or do their own thing. That's kind of again just kind of typical of the Japanese style of things.
Yeah. What would you say you took from that time in that dojo again with like all those different people there? What maybe did you add to your own tool belt from that? What did you learn from that as a grappler?
I mean, I don't know if I learned anything that was globally significant. I think I obviously learned. I mean, I learned some techniques. I was in there with different guys. We were, working out. We were training together. We had a really great array of talent from all different parts of the world. And so, you could come together. You could talk about how training opportunities. I mean, we myself and Pete Roberts, and there was another guy from England, big kid. I can't remember his name. I think it was like I think he built furniture on the side, but he was a big kid. We'd get in the hallway and we'd work out together. And we'd talk and trade experiences and stories, and that's the good stuff about being in the business. But it was really good over there because we had guys coming from different parts of the world into one spot, and you could learn a little bit about them and where they came from and what they were doing, where they came from, and it was always a way to pick up a little bit of something here and there, this that you end up using to form your own style. Um, even though my style is heavily heavily steeped in what Carl taught me, I've got some of my own subtle nuances that I brought to the table through the years just because you do.
So from there, then, the next sort of bullet point I've got on my notes is that suddenly we're back in Florida. There's the Malenko School of Wrestling. There's the Global Wrestling Alliance comes out with a school as well, which I know your dad was involved in. You guys appeared you and Dean were tag team champions in Global, and it got broadcast over in the UK as well at one
No,
point.
I didn't know.
And yeah, and I loved it because, and going looking at it now, I can see why. Because if it was you guys training them and that style and that thing, because to me it was very much it was American, but it had that British, what they call now world of sport style. No one ever called it world of sport for years, but everyone does now. Although it was always just the wrestling, but it was that sort of style, and it was that chain wrestling, and a lot of those guys had those sort of foundations. Really, I mean, from that was the first time I think I'd ever seen you guys. But Black Magic, he then became Lord Norman Smiley,
Yep.
um, Soul Man Alex G and the Soul Patrol, and even there's like Rusty Brooks, who you'd sort of seen on WWE here and there, but actually got to show a bit. And and Dr. Red Roberts, who was probably one of still the top five talkers I've seen. That guy
I,
was amazing, and he's gone into that in his own
I
life
just
now. Yeah,
I just talked to him this morning. Yeah.
he would be someone. I mean, obviously, I know he's moved on from all that now, but he'd be someone. Yeah, I'd definitely like to chat, especially like the psychology of wrestling, because obviously I know he's gone on to that in his
Yeah, he did
career
his
since.
he's one of the few I think that did his PhD dissertation on the psychology of wrestling. Kind of
Oh
a
no.
strange, kind of a strange subject for your doctoral thesis, but so be it. And he got his PhD in psychology.
Yeah. He was always one of those people you're always waiting to see him turn up somewhere else because all like a lot of those guys, not all of them became huge names, but they were all on the other shows, even if it was like as enhancement or whatever. So it showed, I think, the foundation those guys had. I mean, what are your memories of those? So on Bob Roop as well was obviously there with his, again that a great podcast as well. If people haven't listened to it, the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop. Um, do want to get him on at some point, but I know he's taking a break at the moment. But yeah, a great, a walking sort of another walking encyclopedia of knowledge there. And also even Agent Street turned up at Global at one point. What was it like at that point? Because again, it seemed to be from what we saw on the TV. I mean, obviously, what you see on telly isn't always real life, but how was it there? Because you sort of had these um, great Chinese coming through. There were lots of characters. It seemed to be a bit different than the run of the mill, normal kind of show that got put out there, where it was just sort of bland matches kind of thing. You had a lot going on, and even like the early days of like Tom Nash and Gangrel even popped up at some point. I mean, what was that like for you guys? Was it it was in Florida, I suppose, which is your sort of base anyway. So was it like nice for you to have something quite local?
Of course. I mean, as far as having that geography of having the promotion close to you, it makes it a little bit easier. But the world of wrestling, professional wrestling in particular, is the world of professional wrestling. I don't care what promotion you're with. I don't care where you're at. There's some basic premises of how you operate within the business and how guys are with each other and being on the road and traveling and doing things together. I mean, that's really the business. The business isn't just your ring time, it's all the stuff around that and how do you get into the arena and training together and eating and spending more time together with some of the guys than you do with your own family members. I mean, that's those are the good times. And now, do I have some good memories in the ring? Sure. But it's really the whole they used to say it's a whole Megillah. It's a whole ball of wax that really makes wrestling what it is for the guys in the business more than the fans because we're living it. So I would go to Japan, and it wasn't just having a match. It's you're in hotels, you're on buses, you're in close quarters with guys who become really good friends, and you're training and you're going out to eat, and it's a it's a it's almost a very childlike kind of life because you're living without a lot of responsibility. You just got to get on the bus, get to the matches, and somebody's taking care of you, and you're fooling around. You're testing each other with practical jokes and giving each other a hard time and busting each other's bullocks and
Yes.
yeah.
What
So
was it
so
like?
wherever
Because
that
I think,
where
oh,
wherever
God,
that was, wherever there was, it was always the same.
yeah,
It was just different, same thing, different place, same thing, different time.
yeah. No, I just wondered if it'd be more with global. You guys sort of doing the training more. Well, I'm guessing you guys are involved in the training round. 'Cause I know your dad was. Was it
Yeah.
more like being responsible for training people as well? Did that add another? 'Cause I know you had the dojo in Japan, but this is more. Was it more of a responsibility on you now, or was it more of and getting these people through, or was it just sort of like you say, just another day at the office sort of thing?
It was just another day at the office. We knew, we had a couple things we were involved in. One was the promotion itself and making sure that we could do things to keep the promotion going, which was very difficult for any independent. They always, if you were going to start an independent promotion, you better be really well funded or have some other edge because it was always difficult to start a promotion and have it run for any length of time. Um, and then, enter into the picture. My dad being in the business for as long as he was, and everybody knew him. Everybody looked at him as a mentor. So, for him to train people, and then for my brother and I to kind of step in and help out, it was just a natural progression. And we knew that the only way we were really going to help people was by getting them to a point where they could earn a living. And so, if anything we did was the most important piece of things that we did. It was getting people to a place where they could go and they could have a career and earn a living and build a family and do what they needed to do because they were making money. A lot of wrestling schools, they charge a couple grand, you go, and then maybe you work once or twice a month and you get 25 bucks a pop. That wasn't our goal. Our goal was to get you to the big time, to the WWE or get you on over to Japan. And so many of the guys that we trained ended up doing pretty well. I mean, we had a lot of guys that were on the WWE roster. Were they the top of the food chain? I mean, Kane, Glenn Kane was. Tugboat did real well. Johnny B. Bad, Mark Miro, Gangrel. We had a lot of guys who had really good careers. And most important, again, it was a career. It wasn't just a one off where they went and wrestled a few times and made a couple bucks.
Yeah.
That was the goal. The goal was to get you placed to where you now, if this is what you wanted as a guy coming to our school, the goal was to get you placed somewhere, train you right, get you placed somewhere where you could earn a living, and then pat ourselves on the back and move on to the next guy. And I think we did that pretty well. I mean,
I totally agree.
the list. I look at the list of people that came directly through the school, or people that were trained by guys who came through the school, or trained by guys that I trained on the side at different times over in Japan and what have you. And I mean, it's pretty. Even I am impressed at times with the extent of the outreach of our family in the name of Malenko into the world of wrestling across the board. Yeah. I lose sight a lot
Uh,
of times of different people that have come through and had really good careers. I'm like, holy crap, I forgot we trained him.
That must be because I'd say because you had the global stuff. Then later on there was Suncoast Pro Wrestling as well, which is another one I think you guys were involved in. A lot of that just seems to be popping up on YouTube at the moment. There seems to be like an episode a week coming up on that, and it
Yeah,
was
I think that's thanks to Bob Cook, who
yeah.
doesn't sleep at night, so he just sits there and sends and pulls stuff and sends it out there. To the
Again, that was the first appearance of Sean Waltman later on as expat, another guy I think that
yeah,
came through from you
yeah,
guys. So
and had a great
the
career.
list continues. Oh, definitely. And then for yourself, though, this is where you first popped up properly on my radar in the days of tape trading. You had a big run with All Japan Pro Wrestling, um, two-time World Junior Heavyweight Champion, lots of amazing tag matches with your brother. Um, I mean, the people that you work with there. I mean, the British Bulldogs match was always a big one for us in the UK
Yeah,
because it's the Malinkos versus the Bulldogs. I like my one of my favourites personally was you guys against the Funks because I thought that was it was well, all those matches look like matches. They look like fights. They look like it was kind of done when you got in there. It was all done well, and
thank you.
nothing looks like nothing looks like I think sometimes nowadays it looks more like to me anyway, and people can argue it comes across sometimes more like a dance routine rather than an active piece of combat where it's going through
Yeah,
and it's sort of and in those days you could see it getting laid in and all that and and you had to take it.
well, people ask me all the time, what do you think of the stuff that you see nowadays? And I don't. I'm not one guy. I'm not one of those guys to put everybody down because there's a lot of guys that walk around and they suck and they're terrible and this is that. For me, it's a matter of preference. So my preference is not what I see in today's product. Is it good? It is good for some. And face the facts, if if you've got a match or if you've got a bunch of matches that you pull together and they're not necessarily my cup of tea, but you're still able to sell out Wembley Stadium in 2.5 hours, then who am I to say that you suck? Sort of sounds like sour grapes. It was like in the day where a lot of guys were like, "Oh yeah, Hogan, that guy Hogan, he can't work, he can't this, he can't that." Well, they would be saying that while Hogan made $19 million and they made $573.
That totally.
You
I
can you
remember
can say
seeing
Hogan sucks, but yeah,
I can't remember who it was. I remember reading a quote where someone was moaning about Harley Race was making it too show business or something, and he was going to ruin it. And it was like someone, but I don't think it was Feds, but it was someone like before him. And again, every generation, I suppose, has a thing on the next bit that comes along because it's not the same or it's different or whatever. But
Yeah, it's not
yeah,
just professional
it's
wrestling.
yeah.
It's
Oh
life in
yeah,
general.
anything.
It sort of becomes by sheer, by sheer default when you get older that you point back to, the things when you were a kid and how they were so much better and now they suck. But
So
the reality isn't necessarily that. It really is. They're just not your cup of tea. What I watch doesn't suck. It's just different. Are these guys extremely athletic? Are they gymnasts in some sense of the word? I mean, they do some things that I would have never dreamed of doing. I would have never dreamed of doing it because either I couldn't do it or I wasn't going to put my body, I was going to put my body through that. Um, but I don't take it away from them. I won't go there because I don't think it's a smart place to go. I think that sounds like, it sounds like I'm that old bitter guy that now because I can't do it, I'm going to point fingers at everybody. Yeah, that's not me.
no, I agree because it is, say everything moves on, then you do have to move along with it. But look about some of that old Japan stuff. That I mean, the kind of people you're around then. I mean, so we said the Bulldogs, Shamrock popped up, fantastic. Dick Slater, Joel Deaton, Kabashi, he popped up a lot of time. You had Furnace and LaFont in the Can-Am Express.
Yep.
Um, even like David Sammartino, Eric Embry, Scotty the Body, who would later be Raven. You have those guys popping up. But one that was another big favourite of mine. I just wanted to ask you your opinion on them working with them. Um, Doc and Gordy. I mean, two of my favourites that became a tag team in Japan. Dr. Death, Steve Williams, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, and you guys, the Malinkos, had a match with them or a couple of matches with them. What was it like working with those guys? Because it always looked like it hurt.
Um, I mean, when I get asked what it was like working with those guys, frankly, I don't, my memory isn't such that I can relive a match that I had. But what I really remember is the person. I don't necessarily remember the matches. And I had a great relationship with, I had a great relationship with Doc, and I had a great relationship with Steve. Um, you with Bam Bam and with Doc. I had great relationships with both those guys. And they were, you know, they were an unusual two guys because number one, Steve was a burly, powerful guy, and yet could move. Doc, Terry. Terry was so solid in the ring, just solid as hell. I mean, when I get out and I teach, when I do seminars, I always point to how he did certain things as being the way to do it because it just looks so solid. Yet, to work with him in the ring was relatively easy. And he was just a big, nice, easygoing guy for me. And the thing that amazed me about these guys is they didn't just go in the ring; they would go all day long. I mean, they would go out at nights and and hit the streets of Roppongi, which was a party district in Tokyo, which everybody who knows about Tokyo and Japan wrestling has heard the name Roppongi. And they'd be out all nights, and then they'd be in the gym in the morning and working out. I mean, Terry so, but Steve would work out hard, and then all day we'd be on the bus, and then boom, they'd have a match and bar burner of a match, and then they'd start all over again. We'd get back to Tokyo, and they'd leave out at 1 o'clock in the morning to go down to Roppongi for a couple hours. I just I don't know where they found I don't know where they found those kind of reserves to do all the stuff that they did, but they were beasts. But going to the whole Japan thing, and people ask me all the time, well, why didn't you want to work in the States? Why not? Well, number one, I just didn't have it in me to really want to do this full time because I always had the need to do a whole bunch of different things at the same time. So I went to pharmacy school, I real estate developer, I did a bunch of different things, and I needed that for my own personal fulfillment and to keep me kind of going. So I veered away. But when people ask, well, why didn't you want to work the States? Well, I didn't need to. I had everybody and their mother who was anybody here in the United States was coming over to Japan. So we had all the top-notch
Yeah.
guys. I mean, Randy Savage, Rick Rude, Andre was over there. I mean, everybody was over there. So what did I need to work the States for? I didn't need to. I saw everybody and I worked against everybody I ever wanted to work against over in Japan, working against the Funks. I don't know if I would have gotten a shot to work against either Terry or Dory if I was working here in the States, but I got that shot in
Mm.
Japan, and I spent some time with Terry and got to know him pretty well.
No, did you think then, because I know, yeah, because you're a qualified pharmacist and do you think then having that life outside of wrestling helped keep you grounded in professional wrestling? Because I think sometimes you see people that kind of maybe get a bit too caught up in the character or in the lifestyle of it. I think, well, having said, do you think actually you were able to sort of step out and step back in? Do you think that was an advantage, maybe? I think I've worded that okay.
No, I mean, I think what kept me grounded was the fact that, my dad was great at what he did. And I guess at some level he knew it, but he was not a boastful individual. He was not a look at what I did kind of thing. He lived his life just being great in the ring. And he was happy with that. And he didn't have to tell you he was great in the ring. And then so I had my dad on one side and I viewed how he operated as a man, as a professional wrestler and as a man. And he just didn't, he didn't walk around patting himself on the back. And then I also had Carl on the other side teaching me, the submission stuff.
Yeah,
And it took 40 years for Carl to finally look at me one day and tell me he was proud of me. 40 years. And
yeah,
before that I was, I had a skinny neck. I couldn't bridge because I wasn't agile. So he would say, yeah, you're as agile as an iron dog, but you're not anywhere near as strong. I mean, he had all these little sayings that he would say, which pretty much just said I was a piece of crap. He used to, so when he first met me, I didn't have a neck. I mean, I had a neck, but it was a skinny little neck. I was a young kid, and he gave me the name Herr Gelman. So there was a Galeman who was a pharmacist, which is kind of funny the way this ended up happening. But he was a pharmacist in his old neighborhood in the Flanders in Belgium,
mhm,
and I guess Herr Gelman had no neck. I mean, he had a real skinny little neck as a pharmacist. So when Carl first saw me, he nicknamed me Herr Gelman because I had a skinny little neck. So I mean, that's what I got. I got. You're not good enough. You're not this enough. You need to work harder. You need to do this. And not any time did he look at me and go, Jody, you're really good. I'm so proud of you. Took him 40 years to do that. So when you talk about staying grounded, I had a couple guys in my life who kept me grounded. They didn't allow me the leisure or the leisure of thinking I was anything special. Now, and I didn't look for that back then. Yeah, it's funny. I told somebody the other day, I said, now that you get older and you do some podcasts and people come around and they want to know things, it's nice. I mean, I say this all the time too. I say, it's better somebody comes up to you and tell you say how great you were as opposed to, you were a piece of crap and you sucked. So, I mean, I do like that and I get that more now than I used to when I was a kid. But when I was a kid, I was just being told that I needed to work harder and that I needed to, be better. And it wasn't, hey, you did so great, that was phenomenal. And, nobody allowed my head to get big back then.
and I think that's a good thing. And yeah, it's definitely it shows in your work and what you've done. And one thing I was going to say as well, with obviously having a brother who's a wrestler. I mean, you had that big. I think some people might have heard of him. You had a big match for the junior belt in All Japan. Was that the first? 'Cause I know one of your early matches, I think, was against your dad, wasn't it, at one point? And then you fought your brother in Japan. Was that the only time you went against him? It's the only time I could find, I
Yeah,
believe.
that was the only singles match my brother and I ever had
Yeah.
against. Yeah. And then I wrestled. I
What was
wrestled
it
against
like?
my dad. I wrestled against my dad when we were in the Knoxville territory.
Yeah,
When he was there with, when we were there with Bob Roop and Randy Savage and Ronnie Garvin and Bob Orton Jr. and Dick Slater. So we had a bunch of really great people in the territory, and I had a chance to go work against my dad, which is pretty special.
it's like I was going to say it must be very special, mate, because obviously not many people could say they wrestled against their dad and their brother in such big things. I mean, any what was that like? Was there much competition between you and your brother, or was it just more you were just in there doing it?
I mean,
'Cause I
I think
know
there's
people like to think there's
look, there's
some
there's
competition, obviously, but yeah,
yeah, I think look, amongst siblings, there's always that sibling rivalry piece that sits there. How big is it? How invasive is it? That's dependent. But I mean, I wasn't dead set on being better than my brother. That wasn't who I was. But yeah, we had a bit of a sibling rivalry, and eventually, because his career took him to some different heights than mine.
mm,
Um, yeah, he became a notable guy. But I'll say this every day. I couldn't have become as good as my brother became, and if anything, I'm proud of him and have no. It's not like I'm jealous of anything my brother ever did because he wanted it. I didn't necessarily want it, and he just became so damn good. And to this day, I mean, my brother had a great career, and I didn't want the same thing. So, our rivalry was just kind of a base level, brothers fighting to, you know, get the attention of their dad or, be a little bit better than the other on the mat. But, it wasn't crazy.
good. But again, another great match between both of you. As I say, it's the only one I could say as a kid. But later on, after All Japan, you pop up as the Malenko brothers pop up in WCW for I think it's just like a one-shot deal against Nikita Koloff and Ricky Steamboat. You pop up in Puerto Rico. There's a big tour of Australia where some of that seems to be coming out online. And again, now I think people have found the tapes of those. And
Yeah,
then you
Wrestle Riot.
that's all right, that was it. And then you kind of go back into the shoot side of it again with Pro Wrestling Fujiwara Gumi from I think it's about 93, 94 with you got Fujiwara, Bart Vale, again, a lot of names who were going to be coming into being something in that sort of scene. I mean, what was the memories of that? Because that's one we didn't have a lot of to find information out on. But is it a similar thing to UWF? Is it because when we're hitting 93, we're also getting near that sort of birth of the UFC now. And this is something you've already been doing and been involved in for like most of your career. And you're seeing all these names and people that are around. I mean, you'll go back to UWFI as it becomes later on in a couple of years after this as well. But we'll get to that bit in a minute. But what was it that drew you back into that? Was it again the challenge? Was it were you did you have a dojo again, or was it just another promotion that you did a few shows for?
It was just another promotion. But when you talk about another promotion, you're really talking about the core group of guys that make up the promotion. And I knew Fujiwara. I respected him greatly. And some of the guys coming over from here, the Bart Vales, the Jerry Flynn's, the Norman Smileys, the Kane, Glenn came over for UWF at the time. So we just had a great crew. And they were all like-minded individuals because we were all born of the Gotch lineage. I'd like to, if I brag at all, I'd like to say that I was the strongest part of that lineage because I was with him day in day out. But a lot of people trained with Carl. A lot of people came in and out and spent a little bit of time with him or some significant time. But so all the guys who came into UWF at the time were very like-minded in what we wanted to do. We wanted to bring submission. We wanted to bring submission wrestling into the world of pro wrestling, and then enter into the picture what Super Tiger or
Mm.
Sayama brought, which was the Muay Thai piece, which was new to me because I wasn't used to being kicked. And yeah, it was just different. We thought we could take that and make something special of it. Um, there was so much going on in Japan at the time. I think it had its place. what it really did more than anything was it set itself as a predecessor to Pancrase,
Mm,
which when Pancrase started, it was really the first big mixed martial arts promotion. And then if we lose sight of the if we lose sight of the influence of Japanese wrestling and what we were doing there in Japan, just look at Pancrase and look at the number of people that came out of Pancrase that went into the UFC and became UFC stars, Hall of Famers. Um, the number of people that came into UFC out of Pancrase and did really well. I don't know if there's another promotion in the world that could point to that point to the same level or the same number of people. Ken Shamrock, Dan Severn, Boss Rutten, um,
yeah.
and the list goes on.
Definitely, and and again, that's sort of saying, look at the start of this. I think as that branch has sort of been forgotten because I think a lot of people was like nothing happened. And then the UFC happened in 1993, and then it was Gracie Jiu Jitsu everywhere. But there was this whole submission movement that was going on again even before that, and then through Gotch, through you guys in Japan, and the UWF, the UWFI, the pro wrestling Fujiwara Gooby stuff as well. All these people were learning their craft. I mean, for the UWFI as well. I mean, you had Takada, Tamura, Sakuraba was a young boy, I guess, then, probably at that point.
Yeah.
Yoji Anju, Sana, and all these guys have come in, and even into Pride, UFC, and all the things later on. They were all there, or cutting their teeth at least at that point, or getting ready, being trained and stuff like that.
And
And it's, yeah,
I think more people now know about it. When I first started talking about it, and not too many people really talked about it. Most people, when they think mixed martial arts, and in particular when they think UFC, they think Gracie lineage. Because face the facts, the Gracie family was just a marketers extraordinaire, and that's not to take away from their style. It's their
yeah,
style. Yeah, again, it's a preference thing. If I'm going to be on my back, I want to be at the beach. If I'm going to be laying down on my back, I'd rather be at the beach and have a nice little drink and watch the waves and people walk by. I don't want to be on a wrestling mat on my back. Because first and foremost, I was a wrestler. And Carl's old expression, which rings true every single time I get on a mat, he used to look at you when you were on your back and he'd say, get off your back. You look like an old whore waiting for a customer. That was his statement, and he would say it pretty much every single. I probably heard it 2 million times. Um, so when I looked at a lot of the different styles, I wasn't in favor of them, but so be it. And eventually, it took over. And so you can't knock the Gracies, you can't knock the significance they had in the sport and their ability to market themselves and do what they did. And when you talk mixed martial arts, if you ask people, well, where did this all come from? The Gracie name's going to hit hard and fast. Um, but behind that is Gotch and Billy Robinson, and
yeah.
and so many others that were great. There were great shooters, there were great hookers, there were great submission guys that we've lost sight of. Carl used to say it all started. Carl used to say that people always said that it all started in Wigan, but Carl would then point to the fact that it really all started in the States, way before that, because you had the traveling circuses, and
Carnival stuff.
you had all the carnival stuff, and these guys who were just tougher than tough who were doing it here. It just kind of ceased and desisted in the U.S., but then Wigan in particular, the UK and Wigan picked up that movement, and now when people think about it, they think Wigan. They really don't. They think everything started in England. They really don't understand that for a century prior to that, there was all these tough sons of bitches here in the States, who were just as good and just as tough as anybody over there. And that's not taken away from them. It's just saying there was more to the sport than most people know. There is more history to this sport than most people know or understand or even care to know. But I had to listen to this.
Uh,
I had to listen to
I've,
this day out from Carl because that's what he. he was a historian. I mean,
Yeah.
he had an amazing mind, and he was a historian for everything wrestling, everything submission, everything worldwide. I mean, that's how he came up with his own style. Pretty interesting guy.
I'd love to have bent his ear at some point. I mean, I've had a go at trying to do a book myself, and it's all in bits because every time you get to one corner, you find a whole other bit under that corner that you didn't realize was there to begin with. So it's
Yeah.
what started off as a small book is turning into an encyclopedia at the moment, but I'll get there in the end. So, but yeah,
Well,
but
you never stop. I mean, Carl,
that's it.
Carl's words, which always ring true, but they're not necessarily his words. They're, if you stop learning, you die. So, you're always learning. You're always fine tuning your game. You're always finding something a little different that you can do that makes it a little bit easier for you to get inside, or for you to take a guy off balance. I mean, you're constantly finding new ways to do things constantly. And because if you don't, you your game on the mat dies. It's an ever evolving, ever changing, ever learning, always learning sport. And if it's anything different than that, you're not a good mat guy.
Definitely, definitely. And for yourself as well. I mean, you've been. I mean, you had a run there with ECW, where you went and you had a few bits in there. What I liked as well is there's a nice Florida show where you went on with Alex G. So that the global fan in me was happy with that. But then you did a bit with New Japan. Obviously, we covered the UWFI stuff. You had a little brief stop on Nitro to get attacked by Chris Jericho and I think it's the world's most vicious cardboard box or something like that. I remember it being
Yeah.
you getting attacked with something silly. I cut off the top of my head. I'm trying to remember it from memory, but I remember it was
No,
like
you're
a
right.
picture or a cardboard. Yeah, it was something like that. And then New Japan, and then Battle Arts, and then back to All Japan, and then a few bits sort of here and there after that. But what was it then, as you've gone through all these and sort of looking to over your career and that, what was it you would say for you specifically? What do you think you brought to the wrestling world? Obviously, we've gone through the Gotch stuff. It's now been filtered through yourself. What's your philosophy? What would your sort of message be to anyone who's watching this and sees themselves as a wrestler or a grappler, either pro or martial arts grappling or whatever style it is? What would you say? What was that bit they from yourself? What do they need?
Ooh, that's a big question. So, I mean, if I had to point to anything, and I do this in the seminars a lot, it's intensity. If you're gonna bring anything to this game, you bring intensity. Do things like you mean it. Even if this is a scripted deal, and you're wrestling professionally as a scripted performer, it still requires that intensity. And I have a story that kind of came to me recently that I tell now because it's indicative of what you can do, and I'm going to say this because I don't want to come off as I have this thing about not coming off as thinking that I'm all that in a bag of chips. But I was in the ring, and I was in the ring with Randy Savage, Macho Man. And Randy was a guy that I knew from when he was a kid because my dad and his dad were friends growing up. So we all knew each other as kids. So I'm in the ring with Randy, and my dad's in the dressing room. We were doing TV up in Knoxville, and Randy, I do something. I stop him. Uh, he stops me back. He goes to throw me in. I reverse it. He goes into the corner. And that's the only thing I really remember. He reversed it. I reversed it. I throw him into the corner, and he takes the bump into the corner. And then as I charge him, because I always followed in, I never stood. I always follow into my guy. Again, it's about intensity and about legitimacy, and you don't just stand there wait for something. So I'm
Yeah.
following in. He puts his knee up, and I take his knee, and boom, I splattered. And if you take a bump in the wrestling business and you do it the right way, you really splatter. It's so fast if you do it right. And there's some guys who do it phenomenally right. Pat Tanaka was amazing. Um, Richard Slinger, who was I think Terry Gordy's cousin. I'm not sure nephew or something. I'm not sure what Richard was, but anyway, these guys could take a bump so quick. It was like you hit them and then bam, and they were right down. It was just so intense looking. And so I did that. I took a quick bump, and when I got back to the dressing room afterwards, my dad's looking at me. He goes, "Hey, Hojo, you okay?" Used to call me Hojo. Hojo, you okay? And the reason I tell that story, and I tell that no matter where I'm at, is because I was able to, just because I did things the right way in the ring for that split second, I was able to take what my dad knew to be choreographed at some level and make him doubt. For a split second, my dad thought that I really hurt myself. And my dad was a pro from 1955 who trained so many guys, who was an accomplished guy in the ring. So if you can do that with somebody like that, can you do that during the course of a normal match? Can you make people in the audience have just a split second of doubt that what you did was so severe and so, so real in that moment that it was real?
Yeah,
That's the goal. And so when people talk about, the world of kayfabe and the fact that that's dead, you can still bring it back at times. And I brought it back for a split second with my dad. And if you can do it with the great Malenko, who knew everything about this business that you could possibly know, you can definitely do it with a fan sitting in a seat somewhere in an arena. If you do things right, if you do it with intensity. And so that was always my big thing. If I brought anything, I tried to do things like it was a battle, like I was fighting for my life. I never did anything. I never did anything and then pop back up and I wasn't tired now. I wanted to show a struggle out there. And so if I brought anything, it was that, showing that I was struggling to win, to get ahead in that match and eventually get ahead in my career.
no, it's definitely wise words, I think, because yeah, the intensity now and just the fact of I don't know, it seems a bit like even winning matches doesn't seem to be important sometimes today in the overall presentation of it, where it's like, you need to win because you need to make that money to get to the top, that kind of
I
that was
don't blame
always,
I don't blame anybody for doing what they need to do to fit into the system that is going to pay them and keep them
yeah,
whole.
that's true.
So I don't blame any of it. I don't blame any of it. But I think that even within the context of that, you can still do things and and create that doubt in the fans, at least for that moment.
100%,
And that's I think
100%,
what we
yeah,
miss a lot. I think guys are so worried about going so smooth through their moves that it looks like a circus, that it looks like a circus act as opposed to a wrestling match, you know.
yeah.
And
Okay,
it looks
so
good.
what about then? Oh yeah,
No,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
on.
Go ahead, man.
No,
Go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say. So what else for Joe Malenko now? Then, I mean, wrestling nowadays, today. What are you doing? What are you involved in? I know you've been doing some training for different people. If you want, you don't have to talk about that if you don't want to. And but what else are you involved? I know you're doing seminars and different bits and pieces. What else are you up to?
I mean, as far as the wrestling world goes, that's all, that's my what you just said is what I'm looking to do and what I'm
Uh,
doing currently. I'm trying to get out more than I used to. I've never been because I'm just not a big guy in the business. And I had my role in Japan, but I wasn't big here in the States. If I go somewhere in the States, I do any kind of fan thing. The first thing they look at me and they go, Dean? No, no, I'm his brother, Joe, the one that you never heard of. So I'm attempting to do more and more things like that, but I really enjoy the seminar piece because it gives me a chance to get on the mat with guys, and if nothing else, maybe they walk away with with sort of a different flavor or a different feel for how their match can take a better shape and be more be more thought provoking to a fan, i.e., make them doubt, make them
yeah,
wonder. And if I can do that in a seminar here and there, and I help guys do what they want to do ideally to have a career, I enjoy that. I like getting out and about, and I learn too. I see guys do things all the time, and I think, man, that's pretty neat. I would have never thought of turning that way, or grabbing the arm that way, or coming over the top that way.
and
It's a self-fulfilling journey to knowledge, even for myself, while I'm out there trying to share knowledge with other people.
That's it. And I know later this year you are venturing to the Snake Pit in Wigan, so it's kind of all gone a little bit full circle with the story there. Uh, uh, are you looking forward to that? Because
Oh yeah,
you've not been before, I don't think.
never been. I mean, the one thing is it's not the old building. All the original Snake Pit is gone, right? But you know, I grew up with Carl telling me about all these places that he was and all these things that he did. And I heard this day in, day out for so many years. I mean, I knew Carl from 1962 on out, I knew Carl. So I heard stories about his time in Belgium and, his time in the war and his time in, training in Belgium to become, the Belgium national champion, and then go on to the Olympics. I mean, I heard all these things in my mind's eye. I can picture where he grew up. I can picture the waterfront where he grew up, the Flanders. I can envision the people that he told me about for years. I can see the same thing, with the Billy Rileys of the world and the Snake Pit. He painted. Carl just didn't tell stories. He painted pictures, and he did this constantly. So it wasn't just me hearing about what was going on over in Wigan at one point when he went over there. It was me hearing about it for years, for decades, and literally picturing what it was like and getting to know these guys without ever seeing them in person. So all the folks that the Bert Azaratis, the toughest of the tough, where Carl would talk about the amazing strength of Bert, and that guys would get in the ring with him, and they used to I forget how Carl would say it, but when you were in with a guy, if he got a little bit too stiff on you, you would kind of grab him and you'd do that. It was like a telephone thing. You were letting him know that you're a little tight. Well, I guess when people were in the ring with Bert, guys were constantly grabbing him and going, Bert, Bert, easy, easy, easy. So I mean, yeah, it's almost as if I know him and I've never seen him in my life. I've never met him. I've seen pictures of him, but it's almost as if I know him personally. And the same thing for the Billy Rileys and the rest of the guys at the Snake Pit. Lucky enough, I got to meet Billy Robinson later on because he came and hung around Carl, not a lot, but enough. And so I got to meet him. And Tony Charles wasn't part of the Snake Pit, but he was a Welshman who kind of brought that flavor of the British style
Definitely.
to Florida and to the States. He was a phenomenal performer. So all this stuff sits in my head, and now this is my first time to really go over there and see what's what, to go to Wigan. When I when I was starting with Carl, I had a horse and I was training horses, and I had horses. And I had one horse in particular, and Carl was asking me, "Well, what are you going to do if you really want to do this? You gotta get down and dirty with it. You gotta put in the work." And so I ended up selling one of my horses, and I bought a mat. And the mat was a red mat, and in the middle it was an 18 by 18 wrestling mat, and in the middle it had a big circle, and in the circle in black was a WR, and it stood for Wigan's Rebels. And so that's how deep, my roots
Yeah.
in Wigan are without ever being there. So it's going to be neat to go there. It'll probably be somewhat I don't think it'll be a letdown, but it won't be all this stuff that's in my head, because all the stuff that's in my head
Yeah.
has probably been gone for 50 years or more.
No, you can still the where the original was. There's houses now, but you can still sort of go to the road and sort of point it out. And Billy Riley's grave, and that's still there in the house and stuff. Yeah, no, I think you'll enjoy it. There's still a lot of
I'm sure it
sights
will.
to see
And
as such.
Roy and his daughter have been the consummate hosts. Without me getting there yet, they've already like just welcomed me and said anything you want to do
No, they're
here. I mean,
great. Yeah,
she's really, she arranged the seminar piece, and they offered, I guess there's a UK catch tournament, um, a national catch tournament happening around the time that I'm there, and he asked if I wanted to go there and participate at some level, not get on the map, but maybe hand out some trophies or something like that. So just very warm and welcoming and really good people. You
They are
know,
good people. They're great people.
I didn't know Roy
Yeah,
real well. Just knew him from, meeting him in Japan when I was with Fujinami at the time.
yeah.
Thought well of him, and he's obviously keeping the home fires burning in the catch world, which is great.
Do you have any other sort of targets or anything else on the Joe Malenko bucket list that you still want to achieve or get done?
I mean, I've got some places that I want to visit in this world because I've got some ties to them that some of them wrestling oriented, some of them not. Some of them attached to the wrestling stuff, some of it not. I want to go down to Buenos Aires. I've been there before, but I want to go down. I've got family down there from my dad's side of the family that live in Buenos Aires. I'd like to see them. I'd love to get over to Antwerp and again, kind of make my way to the waterfront. I'm sure that it's 100% different than it was when Carl grew up, but it would be neat to go there and see that place.
Yeah.
I would definitely want to continue to go to Japan as best I can, be there however many times I can before I can't anymore.
Mhm.
I love going over there. It's like a second home, and the people are just phenomenal with me. They treat me so well.
Yeah,
Um,
that's still on my list. I've never been yet. That's on my list.
yeah, yeah.
Japan. Yeah.
But
But,
just
no,
again,
that's great.
just teaching, just teaching and doing the seminar work and being out and about and still participating in the business at some level. I'm happy with that.
Excellent. So if anyone is listening to this and want to get hold of you for, I don't know, seminars or teaching or what else, what's the best way for anyone to get hold of you?
Well, I don't like to give out my personal information,
No,
but
fair enough.
I mean, if you go onto Facebook Messenger or something like that, I mean, I get a lot of back and forth with people on Messenger. So if somebody wants to track me down, they could find me. And
Okay.
you know, I'm open to doing things if it makes sense. I've only got
No, fair enough.
I've only got part of my issue when I do the seminar stuff is unlike some other people, I still have to get on a mat. I can't. I'm not that guy to stand off to the side of the mat and go, yes, if you turn a little bit left and you place your right hand underneath, I can't do that. I got to get down on the mat and I got to show and I have to put guys on top of me to feel how they're you know, putting something on so I can tell whether or not they've got it, tight and they've taken up the slack enough. And I have to feel that. I'm not the guy to sit there. Yes, you might want to, yeah. And I don't have much
No,
longer.
yeah.
Who know? I don't know. A couple more years of doing that stuff before it just becomes too difficult to get on up and down off the mat. It's already harder than it was.
Uh, that's it. But no, it was awesome to have you on the show. I've probably got another million questions I could ask you, but I think we've done well today, and thank you for taking the time to join us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Massive, massive thank you to Joe Malenko for taking the time to join us this week. It was an honour to have you on the show. If you check out the show notes at the grappleride.com, you'll see all the information about Joe, and there'll also be some links to his videos about some of the matches and things that we talked about on the podcast. So, yeah, go and have a look and see a master at work. Moving on, as I say, the grappleride.com is our website. All our past episodes and our social media links, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and all that are all on there to have a look at. So please go and give us a like and a follow and all that sort of stuff. New episodes drop every Thursday at 7 a.m. UK time, and you can watch those on YouTube or you can listen to them on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, and all the usual podcast apps that are out there. We are available. Any subscriptions, likes, follows, etc., that you can give us really do help. And again, interact with us, leave some questions, leave some thoughts. It all really helps build up our global grappling community, and it's something that we are putting our heart and soul in to really build up. So every little thing does help us. So anyway, my name's Brett Summers. This is the Grappler Rise Show, and we'll be back next week with another new guest. So in the meantime, stay safe and stay on the mats.